Welcome to Robert Bellissimo at the Movies. This is a YouTube video podcast where we explore all things cinema. I want to welcome back to the show actor Joanne Steven. Joanne, welcome back. Thanks so much for joining me again.
Oh, my pleasure. Can't wait to talk about this film.
Me too. Me too. And I often ask people when, do you remember the first time you saw this? Because I'm always doing older movies. And so it's a little weird to say that for a movie that was released in 2017. But so let me put it another way. When did you first see it? Did you see it when it came out or a little later?
I think I saw it a little later because I didn't see it in a theater. I saw it on one of the streaming platforms. I can't remember which one. And so I think maybe I saw it around 2019, I'm going to say.
2019. Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, for people who haven't seen it, let me just read a little synopsis out. So it's the story of a precocious 6-year-old and her ragtag group of friends whose summer break is filled with childhood wonder, possibility, and a sense of adventure, while the adults around them struggle with hard times. This, of course, was directed by Sean Baker, and it starred Brooklynn Prince, Willem Dafoe. I hope I have her name right, Bria Vinaite, or yeah, I hope I have that right. And Christopher Rivera. And I only just saw it about a year and a half ago because as you know, as being a member of my Patreon, I had it as a bonus movie review to for exclusively for people who are on Patreon. And I had meant to see it for since it came out. I had been meaning to see it. I had never seen it, and I put it on that poll, and it won. And so that's when I first saw it, and I was just blown away. I was just absolutely
Mhm.
blown away because it's the kind of movies that I am deeply interested in, where it's that sort of neorealist approach to filmmaking, or even like if you look at the LA Rebellion, like they're talking about people who are marginalized, or where there's stigmatized, and it's the kind of stories that let's put it this way, it's the kind of stories that Hollywood ignore. The people that Hollywood ignore. And
Mhm.
I just absolutely loved it, and seeing it again the second time, it's almost harder to watch the second time because you, after having experienced it already for a first time, and now I know, okay, what it's about, and what the feelings that elicited me. It's almost like, oh, okay, I've got to put myself through it all over again. So it was a difficult watch, but to me, a very, very rewarding watch. So what to you do you feel what do you take away from the film? I mean, what do you think the film is exploring?
Oh boy, where to start? Well, I mean, the number one thing that comes to mind is it's one of those what feels to me like a rare American film that
Right.
actually looks at issues of class.
Hmm.
So and I think it does it in a way that's it's so pure, and there's no kind of lecturing or moralizing. It's just literally a window, and you're looking through at these people's lives. But the way all the different images are juxtaposed, I mean, you very quickly get the idea that this is a world of the haves and the have-nots.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so, yeah, that's certainly one of the big impressions that I think anyone would have watching it. Um, and then I guess the other impression that's just jumping out at me is how because the central character is this little girl
Right.
Mooney, and her friends, and just how, despite their circumstances, they're still kids. They
Right.
are finding joy wherever they can. They're getting into trouble like kids everywhere. They're exploring. They're fearless. They're just beautiful little souls who are being themselves in this, again, in these circumstances that they have no control over.
Right.
And yeah, there's something also very joyful
Yeah.
about the film at the same time. So it's not just a film about, you know, um, people being downtrodden and therefore sad about it. It's people who are resourceful and who are struggling, not always in very productive ways, but they're struggling to make it through their day, you
Right.
know? So there's something kind of inspiring about the movie too.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because as difficult as it is to see these people
Yeah.
living in poverty and this thin line between, they're living in these budget motels because they can't, for various reasons, get permanent residencies, and like the line of just being out on the street is
Mm.
so thin. But at the same time, there is a certain sense of humor there. Like, for example,
Mm-hmm.
when the kids have bring another kid over from a nearby hotel and they're showing him around, they're like, this guy in this room is always getting arrested. We can't use the elevator because it smells like pee. Or that one woman who's always she's suntanning
Yeah.
topless outside all the time, and she has got a very funny scene with Willem Dafoe, and the kids are watching there, but I felt that it was so organic. Like I didn't feel that the
Mm.
filmmakers were just trying to lighten it up or try to soften it,
Mm-hmm.
because life is like that. It's never just, I mean, yeah, sure, some things are purely bleak and ugly, but often, generally speaking, day to day, even in bleak surroundings or very, high struggles, there's always humor
Mm-hmm.
involved, or even the fact that selling perfume, she as a way to make money, she's selling perfume on the street, and those dialogues were often really really funny. Did you feel that that was rather organic, those moments?
Oh yeah, I mean, you almost forget that it's being filmed.
Yeah,
It,
exactly.
except for the moments where you notice how the framing is so beautiful,
Right.
like uh there's some just beautiful shots, where the characters are composed against a backdrop that's really
Yes.
amazing. So yeah, so that's when you kind of realize, oh yeah, this is actually being filmed. But otherwise you feel like you're kind of following these kids around
Right.
and just following these folks as they go about their life. You're sticking your head out the window and watching, two women bickering with each other or
Right.
something. It's just, yeah, it just feels very natural.
Yeah, it feels like and I mean this is with the utmost compliments to the filmmakers, is that it feels like they just caught it by accident.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting because he doesn't take like a rough documentary approach. It's not
No.
handheld. It's on a tripod.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly, there's no shaky camera work or anything. He shot it in 35 millimeter, so it was shot in film. And I think the fact that it has a cleaner look and bright shiny look to it here in Florida,
Mm-hmm.
I think it actually works so well because they're in the shadows of Disneyland, so,
Mm-hmm.
and they're trying to pass themselves off as like a great time, like the hotel is called oh, I wrote it down here, the Magic, what was it
The
called
Magic
again?
Castle.
Yeah, the Magic Castle. I mean, it was another funny moment was that couple who come for their honeymoon, and they
Yes.
think it, and they're like, "What is the Magic Castle? Like, what is this?" So I thought that worked so well because yeah, it's like on the surface, these things look maybe from a distance so great, but once we go inside, the internal lives and these struggles are a whole different story. But you're right, those backdrops are so interesting and they're quite eye-catching, like the ice
Mm-hmm.
cream store, and some of the stores that they go to, or some of the artwork on
Mm-hmm.
the wall and stuff like that. It's quite
Mm-hmm.
eye-catching, but it looks like something that would be right in Disneyland, but just around it there's no one.
Yes.
There's no one populating the screen.
Yeah.
you know
Yeah, and it points up the artifice of that part of, Florida. You've got the whole fakeness of Disneyland itself,
right.
And then just outside the perimeter of Disneyland, you've got kind of a wasteland,
Exactly.
a wasteland, but then these, you know, kind of rundown motels and things.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of, it really highlights the disparity once again, you know, of the people who have and the people who don't.
Oh, absolutely. And
Mm-hmm.
this young woman that they got to play Haley, Bria, I
Mm,
hope I have her name right, Vinaite. I think it's Vinaite. So she's not an I don't know if she's acting now, but she was not an actor. And Sean Baker found her on Instagram,
mm-hmm.
apparently, and thought she was perfect for it. And by God, he was right. I mean, because
Oh,
I honestly, when I
wow.
saw this movie, I thought, okay, this must be this person's life. This that they must have met her, and this must be her, and it is not her life at
Mm,
all. She, they had to do like a crash acting course. They did with the kids too. There was an acting coach on set. I don't know if they worked with the adults, but the acting coach worked with the kids apparently.
mm-hmm.
And it's amazing sometimes what non-professionals can do. And apparently Willem Dafoe was a help to her, him being like a veteran on set. But
Mm-hmm.
however they worked with her or however they got this performance from her, um, is stunning. And again, with what we said earlier, it looks like this was caught by accident, and we mean that in a good way. A lot of it was not improvised. Apparently, I mean,
Wow.
she apparently wanted it to be scripted. It was scripted. I mean, but she wanted to stick to the lines, even though she did eventually do improvisation because Sean Baker, he likes to encourage that also.
Mm,
But she wanted to come in memorized with the text. The kids did as well, but there was a looseness at times
mm-hmm.
from what I heard. But I just thought she was so brilliant. And what I like is that Sean and Chris Burgock, the screenwriters, they don't try to explain why she's like this, why she's
Yeah.
behaving this way. We don't go to a flashback of her as a kid,
No.
so it makes it harder because and I don't want to sound critical of her, but let's just say she's not maybe not behaving in the best of ways, the most responsible ways. Um, she's in her 20s, so she must have been in her late teens when she had this child. So you have to really, depending on the audience member, you can hate her and be judgmental and critical. And just like in life, when we see people like this on the street,
Mm-hmm.
people, they ignore them, or if they're being loud on a bus or swearing and they seem to be in their own world and things like that, um they're often ignored, and here you're brought into this world, and so the audience has to work to sort of empathize with her and think, okay, well, what why may she, why may she, why is she behaving this way? And for me, um, it's rather obvious that she came from poverty herself. She's an exotic dancer. She's out of work. She's trying to find work. And she looks to be fine. She does all these things to hustle, which are selling perfume, and then eventually she prostitutes herself. But when you look at her daughter, and particularly at the beginning when they're spitting on the roof of that woman's car, and then when the woman starts to yell at them, and you see that they're swearing at her, I mean, they're like the little kids and they're using the F word and bitch and things like that. And you think, yeah, because they're seeing their parents do that, right? Because their parents are quick with
Mm-hmm.
swear words and swear, on the street and cussing and very instinctually go there. And you'd have to imagine that she was brought up in that same kind of environment.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it's I like that he doesn't explain it, so you have to lean into it. I mean, was that your
Mm.
experience with this character? Did you see it in a similar way or a different way?
Yeah, no, I agree with you from the point of view of I think if he had shown, you know, a flashback or something, it would have taken away from the spontaneity of the experience of
Right.
you're literally seeing this person for the first time and you see how she's reacting in all these different situations. You see the choices she's making, and you can kind of imagine, depending on your perspective, you can imagine all sorts of
Yeah.
scenarios.
Yeah.
But I like the fact that it's not made obvious, and there's no, because sometimes when the backstory is over explained, then there's too much of a causal relationship.
Yeah. Too simple,
It's
too
too
easy. Yeah.
simple. And the fact is, many folks like Haley, the main character, they come from a variety of backgrounds, and there's
Right.
a variety of reasons why their lives are the way they are at present. So yeah, I think that frees up the audience to imagine all kinds of things, and the imagination is always more powerful, right?
Mm,
So I especially like that. And and it, because you're using your own imagination, there isn't, again, this sense of moralizing. There's no moralizing
right. Right.
about her situation. It's kind of morality neutral.
Yeah.
All you're seeing is how people are responding to each other
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
behaving. And I just thought that was the most beautiful way to present this scenario.
I agree. And this to me is why he's such a humanist filmmaker. I mean, that was the word I was looking
Mm-hmm.
for early. Why I like these kind of movies, because they're all about people. And,
Mm-hmm.
they just, like you said, they don't try to tell you, oh, you should feel for this person because look at how they grew
Mm-hmm.
up. An audience can have all kinds of different responses to a
Mm-hmm.
character like this. But
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting because even though she is not, she, she's acting in ways that are not good to be acting around a child. Like when she finds out that her the child did act it up, she laughs. It's
Mm-hmm.
almost more like they're sisters.
Yes.
She has her take pictures of her in a bikini, which she used to place an ad
Yeah.
to be to get clients when she started to prostitute herself. Things like that. And so, but at the same time, you feel that she loves the daughter, like you really
Mm-hmm.
feel that she is doing her best to take care of her in
Mm-hmm.
in the way in which she's equipped. But what I found really interesting was her friend Ashley, who's in they're similar temperament. You see them hanging out at the beginning. And what the kids end up doing is they burn down this condo.
Oh,
um
yeah.
and Ashley is figures out that her son and the friends did this. And you see, but I guess she's got a leg up because she at least has a job. She's
Mm-hmm.
works in a restaurant, and she says to her son, the DCF are going to be back here, which are like, I guess they're like a child welfare.
Be like the Child Protective Services, or
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. So again, we also don't know what happened with her, but
Mm-hmm.
it's almost as if has been a real threat for her to lose her son, and so
Mm-hmm.
is trying her best to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And but what I found so fascinating was that she tells her son not to hang out with
With
Haley's
Mooney.
with Saturday Mooney, to not hang out with her, and then she just cuts her friend off. And I kept thinking,
Mm.
I wonder why she didn't just go to Haley and say what happened, and try to work something out or whatever. I mean, did you ever think why she may not have tried to tell Haley about it?
Mm. That's a good question. I mean, when people are in desperate situations, I'm not sure. I mean, and all of us have been in desperate situations to some degree.
Yeah.
I don't think all of us have the ability to be maybe able to reach out to others in an empathic way.
Right.
And
Right.
I had the sense that Ashley had to make a difficult decision. It's either you or me.
Mm,
And, it's like survival. I
right.
think this whole film, we're seeing people just trying to survive
Yeah.
with
Exactly.
varying skill levels, with varying abilities, with varying circumstances.
Right.
And I think possibly Ashley at that point just goes, I can't afford to be dealing with you, and I
Right.
don't have the resources, the inner resources. So it's like cut off. Sometimes we have to do that in life.
Yeah, I thought perhaps Ashley probably knows enough about Haley to that perhaps Haley wouldn't take it as seriously as she would. And maybe she would laugh. We see her laughing
Mm-hmm.
about other things they got into.
Mm.
And so, perhaps instinctually she was like, well, what is telling her gonna do? It's like
Exactly.
they just do not hang out with her. And yeah, when you're desperate, that's the best from her point of view, the
And
best
then a
solution.
line and then a line is crossed later after Haley beats Ashley
Oh
up,
yeah,
right? And
yeah.
Ashley, it's implied that Ashley is the one that does call Child
That's what
Protective
I
Services.
thought. Yeah. It's funny
Yeah,
because I didn't pick that up until the second time
me
I
too. Yeah.
saw it. I figured that's what happened.
Mm-hmm.
But that scene, again, we're talking about these thin lines between, in their case, they're in these hotels, but they can easily the next day be on the street. We see that one
Yeah.
guy leave with his son and he's giving all his toys away because he can't,
Oh,
yeah, because he can't
that
pack
was
it in the car.
that really
Yeah.
got to me.
Yeah. Oh yeah, me too. And I remember, I thought, is he getting kicked out? Did he run out of money? Or is he just gonna go stay with someone else? And again, it's not
Mm,
explained, not that it has to be. So again, it's this thin line to be on the street, but to me, there's
mm-hmm.
also that thin line that violence can just erupt. In
Yes.
an argument that they can be a little more quick with a punch if they're truly, threatened.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
and even just as recently I was on a bus and I saw this guy with these two young kids, and when he was sort of criticizing them in the back of the bus. They were in the back of the bus, and then when they got off the bus, the driver, he didn't like the way the driver stopped because he felt like he shook a little bit, started screaming at the driver. And
Mm,
again, I thought of this movie, because it's that he's probably, you know, he's connected to that for whatever reason. I
mm,
mean, we all are, but we know how to we know that it's maybe not
mm-hmm.
appropriate or there'll be consequences, but it doesn't always dawn on certain people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what when I see something like that happen, it's like, yeah, because to them it's they're connected to it, and the violence when they're threatened or there's an argument. We
Mm-hmm.
see even earlier when she pours the coke all over, or the soda all over that hotel that
Yes.
wouldn't let her
Oh
stay
my God.
there. Again, it's like, yeah, it could just happen like that. But in this case, she did instantly regret it, I think, because she throws up. And then
Yeah.
I think a day or two later, she sees her from a distance outside, and she's just looking, and um, I think she did feel terrible about it. I don't know. Was that your impression?
Well, there's a few moments in the film where you see Haley showing kind of her authentic self. There's that scene where I get it's towards the end where she really does feel like she's losing
Yes, yes.
things, and there's just a brief but very important shot of her in the bathroom just sitting on the floor and crying,
Yeah.
like she so these and yeah, moments where she tries to make amends with Ashley at some
Mm,
point,
mm,
hey, like, can't we be friends again? And
yeah.
it's sort of that really touched me because there's still this vulnerable part of her that is feeling pain. She's just in so much pain.
Right.
And just back to what we were talking about how people can explode into violence. I mean, when folks are living on the margins like this,
Right.
where every second you're just trying to survive, um, they're in such a state of stress.
Right. Right.
And again, I think, it's hard when you're in that mode to feel warm and fuzzy towards other people,
Exactly.
or to be able to regulate your emotions.
Exactly.
You
Yeah.
are you are in a fight or flight
Mm,
situation. And so, it's exhausting and it's
Right.
stressful. So I'm amazed we aren't seeing more fights
Oh yeah. Yeah.
happen out on the street, because people's lives are not easy.
Right.
So yeah, I think all of the people in this film pretty much are kind of always on the edge,
Right.
with the exception of Bobby, the hotel
Right. Right.
manager.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would love
Yeah.
to talk about him for a minute.
Well, me too, because it's so interesting. He is the manager of this hotel, and he's almost like, and I'm very interested in like surrogate, whether a father figure, mother figure, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Uh he's kind of like a father figure in a sense, but
Yes.
at the same time, he is running a business and he has to be blunt and tell people,
Mm-hmm.
hey, you're behind on your rent. And he, rightfully so, often is gets mad at, Haley for various reasons.
Mm-hmm.
But you do see those moments where he tries to help her, or when that one old man approaches the kids, and he's asking their name. Bobby's,
Mm.
I mean, it's highly suspicious. We don't know for sure what that guy was intending. It's highly suspicious he was a pedophile or something. And you see Bobby, not only tells him to leave, but he also scares him to ever come back.
Mm-hmm.
He really humiliates him and gets, a little bit rough with him. So I found that quite fascinating, even though at times he, doesn't like that the kids are running around, or that they're running it,
Mm.
or in his office. At times he allows it, and he's almost laughing about it when they're playing hide and
Yeah.
seek in his office. And
Yeah.
so he has this softness. There's a real, protective quality he has over
Mm-hmm.
all these people there. Was that your impression of what this character was like?
Yeah, I found, especially on the second viewing, I was just really taken with Bobby. I mean,
Yeah.
Willem Dafoe
Oh
just
man, he's so
was,
good.
oh my God, he did such a good job with this
Yeah.
role. Because again, it could have been over explained, overstated, but you literally just see Bobby going about his day. You see him taking care of the motel, you see him doing he's painting, you see him fixing things, you see him lugging appliances around with a younger guy who I assume is his son.
I was going to ask you about that, because that's
Yeah.
what I thought. And the first time around, I didn't really give much thought to that. And I thought, yeah, because he says we see him and he's helping him throw out a mattress that's full of bed bugs.
Yes.
And then later on, he's helping him take stuff down in the elevator.
Like a big freezer or something.
Yeah,
Or
and then he's
it's the ice machine.
yes, that's right. That's right. And he wants to pay him, and then he says, "Oh, he says to Bobby, oh, I told her happy birthday from you," and they're like, "Who is the her?" And he's like, "No, no,
Yes.
don't. You shouldn't have done that." And then he says, "Yeah, I don't want your money. It takes me an hour and a half to get here." So it's like, well, who would come an hour and a half for a little bit of
Yeah.
money? And I thought this is like perhaps the son trying to find ways to spend time with the father, and
Yeah.
perhaps this, the person he said happy birthday from Bobby is the mother.
Yeah.
Again, that's what I thought, was perhaps going on. And if you notice that you don't often see that other guy's face very, very clearly.
No, that's right.
It's very mysterious the way they shot it as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I would imagine he left a lot of blanks out there, so that again, we're not just like spoon fed the motivations behind Bobby becoming like a surrogate figure,
Exactly.
like, oh well, he's the absent father, so he's making up for it with
Right.
other people. Was that your impression?
That's what I was left thinking. Yeah, and so you see Bobby going about his day, you see him at his computer, you see him, maintaining the place, you see him walking around with who I'm assuming is the owner of the motel,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
doing like a checklist of things to be done. And so you see him as somebody who he's probably not super far removed from the residents who live there, but by some circumstance, he now has a job
Right.
and he has to work to keep himself together. And he's just trying to make it through the day as well and deal
Mm,
with all of these pressures that come at him, and sometimes he blows up.
Right.
He's
Right.
not, he doesn't always handle his emotions all that well
Right.
either.
Right.
But there is this, yeah, there's this very caring kind of uh, empathetic quality to how he does interact with most people. He tries, you see him trying to do the right thing,
Right.
even
Right.
though sometimes like he goes maybe above and beyond, because you see the employees of the motel kind of look at him like, really, you're going to allow this? And Bobby's going, no, no, I'll try to make it work. You know, like he really does care. And
Mm,
then at the end, where he's trying to mediate this potentially disastrous encounter between the child protection services and
right.
Mooney and Haley. I mean, you can see him looking at the situation, thinking, okay, what can I do?
Yeah, and there's nothing he can do, which
And
is
there's nothing
yeah.
he can do. And there's
Right.
this very poignant, in the midst of this scene, you see there's a shot of him in the stairwell, I think, and he's just having a
Yeah.
smoke, and he's just waiting out the storm because
Yeah.
there's nothing he
Yeah.
can do. Oh my God, that
Yeah, it's
got to me.
devastating. Yeah,
Yeah.
that last scene is so brutal. And
Oof.
you had mentioned, it's interesting because Haley, she starts to get quiet towards the end. They go into
Mm.
that one hotel and they pretend to be staying there in order to get food in the
Oh my
lobby.
gosh.
And you see Haley, there's a close up of Haley, and she's not. It's one of the few times you see her because she's often talking, high energy. She's not talking, and I think she knows what's coming. It's like
It's like
they've
the last
already.
meal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
That's
yeah,
what struck me. I thought this
yeah,
is the Last Supper
exactly. And even when they take her, she
when
she
they
just
take
looks
Mooney.
completely vacant. She doesn't
Yeah.
say anything until they lose her. When she runs, then she starts to get angry. I like that, even that close up of her screaming out "fuck" and it's like right in her mouth, and it's just all. I thought that was such a great shot because it's just all that angst and feelings just
Mm.
bursting out. I really like the way he did that. But that last, of course, what's the most heartbreaking is beautifully performed by the little girl playing Mooney is Brooklynn Prince when she goes to her friend and she's sobbing, that they're
Oh my
going to
God.
there that she has to leave and she's saying goodbye. And the what's so interesting was that her friend's first instinct is to just run over to Disneyland, and I
Yes.
kept thinking, what is that about? I mean, I was curious why you thought that was what they decided to do.
Well, that was, I found really moving. I wasn't as moved the first time I saw this movie, but the second time, holy cow, as soon as they started running off to and the camera's following them the whole, like behind them,
Yeah,
watch as they run, they like that seemed to go on for a long time. They're running down
yeah,
streets, they're running kind of through parking lots, they're running through fields,
yeah,
and then you realize they are running to the grounds of Disney World
right, right.
itself, and then they enter in, God knows how they get into. And at that point, I thought, is this like a fantasy? Are they maybe
Oh,
in
I
a,
never thought of that.
are they maybe living in a fantasy world where
Right.
they're just escaping to a happy place?
Well, yeah, I think it really is that simple, right? Whether it's a fantasy or they got in somehow, it is that, these kids are aware that that's like the happiest place on earth for kids. And so their first instinct
Yes,
is, oh, my friend's in trouble. Let's run over. It's like, it
exactly.
feels like what
Yeah.
a kid would do. It's kind of like, where's my happy place? Where do I go? I thought that,
Yes.
yeah, because at first I remember being like really not in a good way perplexed, like what is that ending about? And then the more I thought about it, I thought,
Hmm.
I think that's really what a kid would do in a
Definitely.
situation like that.
Definitely. And Mooney is a very independent kid. She's,
Oh, definitely.
she and her friends are left to roam around the streets all day while
Yes.
their parent or parents are struggling to get by, trying to
Yeah.
make a buck, doing whatever. or using or committing crimes or doing whatever they're
Yeah.
doing to survive. And so these kids are very kind of resourceful and
Yeah.
fierce.
Yeah.
Their fierceness. I just love the way Mooney was fighting back against
Oh yeah.
the child welfare workers. I mean, don't get me wrong, we need child welfare in our society, and there's many more good stories that come out of that than bad stories, but we only tend to only hear about the bad
Right.
stories. But that bodes well for Mooney, that she's a fighter. I
That's
mean,
true. Yeah.
as opposed to, a kid who becomes depressed and just kind of deflates, their spirit becomes
Mm,
deflated. That
that's a
I
good point. Yeah.
yeah, I really, I found that scene very painful to watch, where they're fighting with Haley and Mooney and the cops are there, and it's like never good when the cops have to attend a call like that.
Right. Right. Right.
But but the energy that Mooney was able to connect to, and just went to her place of safety, which was her friend's
Yeah.
motel room, and then the two of them escape. It's like, yes.
Yeah.
That spirit was able to triumph.
That's a good point. That's a good point. There is something hopeful about it. I mean, on the one hand, you're being separated from your parent, but on the other hand, they're gonna take her some. I mean, she can't keep living that way. I mean, it's only gonna get
No,
worse, right? So,
no.
um, there is something, hopeful I found
Mm-hmm.
about the ending. But some of the things I read was, that's a real hotel. They were like it was operating while shooting.
Oh, wow.
And I heard Sean Baker say, because his co-writer told him about this, which is what got him
Mm-hmm.
interested in it. But it's like it's not just like there that stuff like that's happening. It's happening everywhere, like
Oh, yeah.
um, all over the country. But we were talking earlier about, yes, it was mostly scripted, but there were moments of improvisation.
Mm-hmm.
For example, when she is selling the perfume, like they like the camera's pretty far back. Like they just said, okay, go and approach real people. And I figured that it was because it feels very real. I was like, they must have just done that.
Oh, absolutely. And I loved it. Haley would approach people, and then Mooney would pipe up, she Haley would be trying to sell it to a male customer. Here, don't you want your wife to smell nice?
Oh
And
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and uh, and then Mooney would pipe up and say things like, "This will make the girls love you."
That was great. Yeah,
So cute.
I love that. I love that. So some of the other things I read was well, it's interesting because he wanted to do this before he did Tangerine,
Oh.
which was like a big breakthrough for Sean Baker. So he wanted to do this
Mm-hmm.
first, but he couldn't raise the money for it. And then when
Ah.
they did that got him a lot more notice, and then he was able
Mm-hmm.
to get A24 to produce this film. But there were even some potential A-listers that were going to be in it, like apparently some of the names. This is according to IMDb, to play Haley were Britney Spears or
Oh.
or Miley Cyrus, right? And
Oh, wow.
I, it's interesting and I can see why he was like, no, he felt that it wouldn't be authentic to use millionaires to be playing these people who are marginalized.
Yes.
And maybe they would have been good. But I mean, I see what he's saying, because as soon as it starts, you're like, oh, there's such and such.
Mm,
And if they're doing a good job, you get lost in the story.
yeah.
But I suppose that goes for any film or any story when you noticed a celebrity.
Mm-hmm.
uh and it made me think it's interesting, about just like the nature of celebrity in general, and
Mm-hmm.
how it can be hard to accept certain people in parts. If they're really famous, we know that they're really famous. And I think that's the right choice, is to get someone that no one knows. I mean, Willem Dafoe is the only person anyone in this would know.
Hmm.
What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I mean it all would depend, of course, on the actor, but I think I appreciate that in this case he went with somebody
Yeah,
who was unknown, and I'm assuming, there was a lot of discussion before casting was finalized, so he would hopefully have gotten a sense from the actor that they had a vulnerability and they were open
yeah,
to what the project was going to entail, and he's probably sensed, okay, this is somebody who I can work with,
yeah. I think so. Yeah,
which I think ultimately is what a director would want, regardless, right? I mean,
yeah,
whether it's somebody famous or not, they need somebody with that ability to give and take and so on. And I think, yeah, in this case, I think it added to the flavor of the film that it wasn't somebody you knew.
yeah.
Yeah, it just seemed that much more raw and honest.
I completely agree. I think, I mean, he's such an artist that I mean, he even said he has to, you forget, actually, you forget that often directors do not have final cuts, who are not
Mm,
independent, right?
true, yes.
With some very few exceptions. But he said he has to have final cut. He'd rather make a hell of a lot less money. He said he couldn't live with himself. If it was not, also the editor, which is incredible.
I know, it's
Um,
amazing.
and after now having seen, I haven't seen his first film. He doesn't like it very much, he said, but I haven't seen it. Um, but I've seen the other ones except Prince of Broadway, which I haven't been able to find. But
Mm.
even film, did you see Starlet by any chance?
No, not yet. I've seen Tangerine, which
Okay,
yeah, which led me to
yeah,
the
that's
Florida
great.
project for
Yeah,
sure. And where I think the actors in that film were pretty unknown as well,
yeah,
and
yeah,
and very like perhaps maybe hadn't even acted before.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
No, that I don't think they had either. I mean,
mhm,
that's where, I mean, because if you look at the filmmakers he's influenced by, who would use a combination of amateurs and
mhm,
professional actors, or just amateurs.
right.
He loved the neorealists. He loved Charles Burnett. He loved Cassavetes. I mean, it says here, it's so his influences are so interesting. It's like Ken Loach, Spike Lee, Jim Jarmusch, Mike Lee, and then but then you have someone like Spielberg, who's like the total opposite. Because I follow him on Instagram and I've seen a lot of interviews with him, and he is such a film buff that he likes things that you would not expect, like really genre driven movies that you
Mm,
would not expect. But his influences come, I mean, his movies in particular, you could certainly see,
mhm,
like I said, the LA Rebellion and stuff. But he's really has a wide variety of taste. But even in
mm.
Starlet, apparently he had the I don't know if he was going to get them for sure, but Tippi Hedren and Dakota Johnson, who are,
Oh,
the
yes,
great,
yes.
because it's about this very close friendship between this uh uh porn star and this older woman, this old
Oh,
woman.
wow.
It's really, really good. And he apparently, I don't know if he could get them for sure, but apparently they were names floating around, and it's the same thing. He's like, well, it's not going to be, again, they're millionaires. I don't know if Tippi Hedren's a millionaire. The now, but certainly her granddaughter is a big star, and
Hmm.
he just can't do it. He did Dree Hemingway played it. She is an actor, but she's not like super famous.
Mm.
Um, but she was wonderful in it. So I do admire that he sticks to his vision no matter what.
Oh, for sure. That gives him a lot of integrity. The other film I saw recently by Baker was the Red Rocket.
Oh
Red
yeah, I love
Rocket.
that. Yeah.
Yes, which was incredible. And I think in a similar vein, he cast that main role. And I mean the guy who plays him, whose name escapes me right now, but
He
I
was
think
so good.
I mean, he was known, but
Yeah,
not super well known.
right,
And
right.
I mean, wow, that was a casting from heaven. I can't imagine any other actor tackling that role.
Yeah, yeah, and that also is about someone who works in the porn industry, right? So,
Oh my
but
goodness.
it's so interesting because it's like it's those characters that in life that if you met them and they say, "Oh, hey, I work in the adult film business," people would perhaps, generally speaking, feel uncomfortable, right? Or again, it's they're stigmatized. And I even when I've
Mm,
when I've heard interviews with different people in the adult film industry, they refer to people not in the adult industry as civilians, which I find
right.
so interesting.
Yes.
Where
Oh,
it's us and them, right? And
oh, for sure.
but then when you watch his movies and you're like they're these labels are just labels, right? They're human beings and they just do things that are a little outside the mainstream.
Well, it's another way in which the dividing line between sections of people in our society is really a very blurry,
Exactly.
gray, very changeable line. Like Baker's films are about class. So I mean the that thin line between the haves and the have-nots is very, very a sketchy line. The line between, yeah, regular actors and porn
Right.
actors, is very thin. You know, how do you define a sex worker? I
Right.
mean, like that's another thin line, I mean, who's to say, women who go on dates and refuse to pay for their own dinner. I mean, what's that about?
Exactly.
One
Yeah.
I've heard arguments that that's a very transactional relationship,
It's a good
so
point. Yeah.
it's like, so I like the way he he plays with that,
Yeah.
and people go in and out and back and forth between the two layers. It's, yeah, it's very thoughtful, I
Yes.
find.
No, I completely agree. I've written him a couple of times. I've been hoping to interview him
Oh
because
yeah.
someone who's been on my show before, he interviewed him because he's also a big physical media collector. And this person I know whose show is called Disconnected, it's all physical media. And Sean Baker was following his show.
Oh wow.
So he invited him on. So I'm hoping to get him on. And if Sean is watching this, come on. I'll definitely. It's again because as you know, I mostly do older films, so a lot of the filmmakers I'm talking about are dead. So it's so interesting when I do this, and it's like I can tag him in this on Instagram, and he could potentially he could
Yes.
potentially see it, right?
From
Um,
your lips to the film god's ears.
yes, exactly, exactly. Let's hope for the best. Was there anything
Yes.
else you wanted to mention about this film?
Oh goodness.
I think I said everything I wanted to say, but
Yeah, I'm just referring to my notes here. Maybe just one, because you've been talking about Charles Burnett
yes.
quite a bit lately, and I on your kind of, you put a bug in my ear, so I watched a couple of his
Oh,
films,
oh, good.
and you're saying that he was one of many influences on Baker, and I noticed, I mean, yeah, that all the themes that we've just talked about are similarly present in Burnett's films.
Yes,
But
yes.
one thing I'm kind of fascinated by in all those films that I've seen of Burnett's and the films I've seen of Baker, another theme is watching people work, like the
Right,
theme of work.
right.
And in Burnett's films, especially, like there's long sequences where you're just watching people in their place of work
Yeah,
doing the tasks, whether it's, killing sheep, in a meat manufacturing, or I guess a slaughterhouse is what it is, or whether it's doing any other kind of digging holes in a ground, or there's long sequences where you're just watching people do work, and same with uh, Baker's films. Like even in Red Rocket, the main character is a hustler, and I mean, it's a more comic film, but
Yeah.
lots of scenes of where he is literally just trying to make a buck.
Right, right.
And you see him progress from, just very, very low stakes kind of making money to, selling weed, and then, like, I think defrauding people at some point, if I recall correctly. And then in Florida Project, you're watching Bobby, the motel manager,
That's a good
like we
point.
were
Yeah.
saying earlier, like doing all these tasks to kind of make, and I just thought that was so interesting. Like,
Yes.
how many films do we see where it's all actually operationalized,
Right.
how people are making a living? I
Right.
think it's not very often, and yet work is supposed to be so central to the American identity.
It's a good point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I thought that was so interesting.
Well, that's, that reminds me, because there's actually, and often there's a line people often say that I really don't like, which is that drama is life with the boring bits cut out.
Mm,
And a guy like Charles Burnett or Sean Baker is interested in the quote unquote boring bits.
yes, that's a good
Same with
point.
someone like Chantal Ackerman. Um,
Yes, yes.
yeah, because because I'm so I mean, Hollywood movies make people, general public feel like they're not interesting because they have to have all these twists and turns and superheroes and stuff.
Yeah.
And it's, and in working, like what these people do for a living, I mean, I think it says a lot about all of us about what we do.
Yes.
And I think in these, whether, Charles Burnett's films and in Sean Baker's films, what they're doing to get by says so much about what they're struggling with or what their position is
Mm,
right now, and how their job makes them feel about the rest of their life.
yes.
And that's really true of all of us.
Yes, and how soul destroying
Yes.
most jobs can be,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
how little reward there actually is. I mean, we like to think, that work is somehow an elevating
Right.
aspect of society. And yes, it is. I think in general, people do want to be useful and productive, but the facts of work,
Right.
the actual reality of work for so many people is that they're busting their ass just trying to
Yeah.
survive. Yeah.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And I can't say that this was the filmmaker's intent with this, but there's almost something like an anti-Hollywood message with the Florida
Oh,
Project.
yes.
Because, again, when we think of Disney, we think of the happiest place on earth for kids. And this is like, oh yeah, well, this is sort of like, well, let me tell you what's, when you think of Disney, let me give you another reality,
Yes.
of what's like right next door. And apparently Disney World, the working title was the Florida Project.
Oh,
I
wow.
just read that last night. And
Wow.
I mean, what that's just something I'm seeing in it. I'm sure, and I can't say for sure, but I'm sure the filmmakers were approaching this from a humanist, realistic way as they
Hmm.
could. I don't think they were thinking about, oh, let's trash Hollywood or something like that. But if that's just something that for me pops out, I'm like, this is just, let me give audiences a little bit of a dose of reality.
Definitely. Oh,
Yeah,
no, no, for sure. I appreciate that a lot about Baker's films is
yeah,
you are seeing a sector of life that is there, and many of us don't want to see it, but
right,
it's there,
right.
and it's just as rich as any other part of life.
Oh, absolutely. I completely agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And anytime I hear someone say, "Oh, I'm boring," or "My life is," I'm like, "It's not boring." Maybe it wouldn't
No.
translate well in a book because books are, but visually speaking, in movies, I think you could. I think you could tell really engaging stories about anyone. Really anybody.
Yeah.
It's the
Yeah.
beauty of the medium, I feel.
I agree with that. Yeah.
Great. Well, This was such a great review and such a great chat, Joanne. So if people want to follow what you're working on as an actor, where can they go on social media?
So good place is on Instagram. I'm on Instagram and Facebook. So Stephen Joanne 60.
Great. Fantastic. Well, I will leave the link in the description box below for where you can follow Joanne and see what she's up to. And Joanne, thanks again for coming on. This was such a blast.
Oh, thank you, Robert. This was so much fun to talk about. I mean, I just, this film, I mean, I don't know if I'll ever have the guts to watch it a third time. It is hard. It's a hard watch, but as you said in the intro, very, very rewarding. So I encourage everyone to see it. So thanks for allowing me to vent my thoughts about it.
Oh, my pleasure. Anytime, and come back again down the road and we'll do another one
For
by
sure.
maybe Baker or something similar.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I want to thank all of my members on Patreon. If you're interested in becoming a member of my Patreon, head over to the link, patreon.com/Robert Bellissimo at the movies for full details. Patreon is exclusive content that I create month in and month out. And as a subscriber, you are able to vote on polls and contribute to what I do on Patreon month in and month out. So head over to the link for full details. You can also leave a donation directly to my YouTube channel by pressing the thanks link, which you will find directly below the video frame. Just click on the thanks link and you can leave a donation there if you choose to. And lastly, if this is your first time here, please consider subscribing. It is absolutely free to do so. By pressing the Robert Bellissimo at the movies logo, you will see it floating above my head in the top left corner. To your top left in just a second, just click on that and then click the bell in order to get a notification every time I release one of my new episodes. Also, click the like button and leave a comment below. Let me know what you think of this episode. Also, you can also share the episode. All of these things are what produce traction to my YouTube channel. So I appreciate you watching and thank you again. And I will see you in the next episode.